Just over a decade ago, the line between Oxford and Bicester was a small, awkward branch line with a poor service. Now it has become a vital link with several key stations and brings a lot more in the future too with the upcoming East-West Rail. This is a clear example of a line regeneration that's been wildly successful, but how did it all begin? Not long after the first line to Oxford opened by the original GWR in 1844, many more lines by various companies were planned in the area. The one relevant to us is the Buckinghamshire Railway, which built a line from Oxford to Verney Junction, which is between Bicester and Bletchley, where it connected up with a route they opened a year earlier from Banbury to Bletchley, at which it met up with the London North Western's line from London to Birmingham, now the West Coast Main Line. The line opened in stages, with a section from Verney Junction to Islip opening in October 1850, including a station at Bicester. Then in December it extended to a temporary station on Banbury Road north of Oxford, until the final section was opened in May 1851. At Oxford, a new terminus station was built separate from the GWR's existing one, known as Oxford Rowley Road, pronounced Rowley, not Rewley, and this was located just to the east of the Oxford station that exists today, which opened in 1852 after the GWR extended north. Despite being next to each other immediately north of Oxford, the two lines had no connection until World War II, partially because the GWR's line was built to broad gauge, whereas the Buckinghamshire Railway would use standard gauge, although the GWR's line was converted to standard in 1872. You can still see a path alongside the line today where the separate one used to be. The line was decently used, particularly for freight, until most of that traffic was diverted via Didcot, leaving it starting to lose money. It was then taken over by the London North Western Railway in 1878, when the chairman of the LNWR was elected to the Railways Board. The LNWR also previously absorbed the Bedford and Sandy Railway between Bedford and Cambridge, and then in 1879 it absorbed the Bedford Railway from Bletchley to Bedford to form a full route from Oxford to Cambridge, which came to be known as the Varsity Line, after two universities at each end. Later on, in 1905, the LNWR opened some halts along the route between Oxford and Bicester at Wolvercote, Oxford Road, which was the same site as the former temporary Banbury Road terminus, Oddington, Charlton and Wendlebury. Then one more opened in 1906, first known as Summertown Halt, then renamed to Port Meadow Halt a year later. In 1910, a second station in Bicester was opened by the GWR on what was known as the Bicester Cut-Off Line, which provided a new route from north of Princess Risborough to south of Banbury, what's now part of the Chiltern Main Line. The station gained the suffix north to distinguish it from the other station, although I can't figure out when. It might have been as soon as it opened or a bit later on. There was also no track connection between the two lines at this time. All of the halts closed in 1917 during the First World War, then all reopened again in 1918. Then, as part of the railway grouping in 1923, the London and North Western Railway became part of the London, Midland and Scottish Railway. They decided to close all the halts in 1926 due to low ridership and the rise of motor buses in the area. The line continued as was for a while, proving particularly important as part of a route to avoid London during the Second World War. During the war, a railway link known as the Bicester Military Railway was made between the line just west of Bicester and nearby military sites at Piddington, Arncott and Graven Hill, and it is still used today. Also on the same branch today seems to be some sidings which are, or at least were, recently used for storing some of the new South Western Arterial trains, and it's probably used for other storage as well. Back to the history of the line, and in 1948 all the railways were nationalised. During this time the network was split by regions, largely mirroring the previous companies, and the whole route from Oxford to Cambridge became part of the London Midland region, although in 1951 the section from Oxford to Claydon Junction just east of Bicester was redesignated to be in the Western region, which was the same time when Oxford Rowley Road station was closed and all services transferred to the remaining ex-GWR station. The station in Bicester was also renamed to Bicester London Road in 1954 to fully distinguish the two stations. This was a time for huge reorganisations across the network, and in 1955 upgrades were proposed to the Oxford-Cambridge route, particularly for freight. However, by 1959, British Railways had changed their mind, and instead were thinking about closing the entire route, but held off by reducing operating costs. Plus, the route still seemed pretty important. In fact, even the infamous Beeching Report of 1963, notorious for closing huge swathes of the network that weren't deemed profitable, including some pretty major routes, recommended keeping the line with just a couple small reductions. Despite this, later in December 1963, closure was still put forward as the railway didn't cover its own costs, and it was approved, for whatever reason. Due to local protest, the line between Bletchley and Bedford was kept, but the rest of the route was lost, with the last services running at the end of 1967, and the route officially closed on January 1st, 1968. And over the next few years the tracks were lifted on most sections except between Oxford and Bicester/Claydon junctions, which remained open to freight. However, it was single-tracked in 1973. This was not the end though, for in 1987, Network South East, along with initiatives from Oxfordshire County Council, began running an Oxford-Bicester service once more, reopening the station in Bicester, now renamed Bicester Town. Then in 1989, Islip Station was also reopened. Things started off small, with just a handful of trains a day and just a handful of passengers using them. During privatisation in 1996, services were handed over to Thames Trains. Services gradually increased, possibly including at one stage a direct Bristol to Bicester service before the Bristol to Oxford trains were withdrawn in 2003. Services were then transferred to First Great Western Link in 2004, for the brief time that was a thing, then to First Great Western in 2006, now part of the Greater Western franchise. From 2005, extra trains ran in the weeks leading up to Christmas to support high traffic at Bicester Village Shopping Centre, and later by 2009 services have been increased to run every 90 minutes from Oxford to Bicester on weekdays, and a staple Sunday service had also now been introduced. At this point it was briefly branded by First Great Western as the Bicester Link line. But then also in 2009, Chiltern Railways, who ran the line through Bicester North, proposed linking the line at Bicester over a new curve onto the Chiltern Main Line route towards London Marylebone as part of their Evergreen 3 project, and provide a brand new route from Oxford to London. This was confirmed to go ahead in 2010, and in 2011 Chiltern took over operations of the line, so it was briefly disconnected from the rest of their routes. The line was closed from February 2014 so the work could go ahead and a bus service ran for the time. The track was redoubled, all level crossings, except for London Road and Bicester, were closed, and the stations got rebuilt. Services began from Oxford Parkway to London Marylebone in October 2015, then made it to Oxford in December 2016. Through running to Oxford had got slightly delayed due to difficult conditions in Wolfcut Tunnel, and because what are now platforms 1 and 2 at Oxford was still being rebuilt. Along with the partial rebuild of Oxford Station, both Islip and Bicester Town stations were completely rebuilt, with Bicester Town being renamed Bicester Village to reflect the world-class shopping destination next door, but this has the weird side effect of a station being demoted from a town to a village, despite it being massively upgraded, and it's not like the place got any smaller. Also, a poll of local residents overwhelmingly wanted to keep the name Town, but Chiltern decided not to. Bicester Village is a designer outlet featuring mostly world-class luxury brands way outside my budget. It is spread across many sites in the world, and the original one here is weirdly sometimes get referred to as Bicester Village London, despite not being that near to London, but it is popular with tourists. Because of this, many of the signs, including the announcements on the trains, are in multiple languages. Part of the reason for upgrading the line was to improve access to Bicester Village, as they were expanding but had limited space for parking, and the line would provide a new direct link to London. The station today, which was effectively a new station, has 2 slightly staggered platforms and a whopping 3 ways in and out. The main entrance is through the new station building located at the eastern end of Platform 2, the London-bound platform, next to the footbridge, and I actually think it looks really nice. It's modern, but the blue tiles give it that character that lacked a bit in other recently built stations. And on the inside it has everything you'd expect, like a help desk and toilets, but also a cafe, which is cool. There is this annoying car park immediately outside, but it's not too long of a walk to Bicester Town Centre to the north. There is also a shuttle bus looping between here and Bicester North Station, allowing easier transfers and passengers at Bicester North to get to the stores here. The second entrance is further down Platform 2, which leads directly into the side of a multi-storey car park to the Bicester Village Shopping Centre, with a short, well-directed route to the main entrance. Just behind the outside of the gate line, I believe there is also a lounge/waiting area room, managed by Bicester Village themselves rather than Chiltern. The third exit is right at the end of Platform 1, where there is an ungated entrance out onto London Road, this being closest to where the much smaller Bicester Town originally was, although its single platform was on the other side. Just to the east on London Road itself is the line's only remaining level crossing. It is being proposed to close due to the increase in services with East West Rail, more on that later, meaning that the gates would spend most of their time closed. Bicester residents have been unhappy with this as there's no real alternative route for traffic, so an underpass is now being proposed with a foot and cycle path, although interestingly only 1 lane for traffic, I assume in an effort to reduce car usage. But the station itself is now very well used, the 4th busiest in Oxfordshire, ranking higher than Bicester North, and it could definitely be classed as a success. Oxford Parkway was the only completely new station when the line reopened in 2015, located near-ish to Kidlington and the north of Oxford. However, its site is actually adjacent to the site of both Oxford Road Halt and the temporary Banbury Road station, which were on the other side of the road bridge. Later built here was a large, quite ugly grain silo which became disused since the 1980s and became a bit of a hated local landmark, but it was demolished here when the station was built. A park and ride, one of Oxford 5, opened here in 2002, known as Walter Eaton Park and Ride, and Oxford Parkway was originally going to be called Walter Eaton Parkway to match this, but in 2013 it was changed to be Oxford Parkway. In fact, the reverse has happened, and the park and ride is now usually referred to as Oxford Parkway instead of Walter Eaton. The Parkway suffix doesn't really have a consistent meaning across the railway network, but here is the station outside of the town it's named after, designed for park and ride trips. It can be used for parking and visiting Oxford, but I'd argue it's much more useful for Oxford residents to park at for trips towards London due to the current frequency and that Oxford main station is a little way away from the city centre. The station features a similar looking building to the one at Bicester Village, and all of the same facilities, although with only one entrance. There is a footbridge over to the London-bound platform, which is also right next to the A34, making it slightly unpleasant, but it isn't too bad. The bus links are very good, both towards Oxford and to places like Blenheim Palace, and it also has a good amount of cycle storage. I also like that the station totem has Chiltern's old logo. A significant future thing is that Oxford United Football Club are thinking about relocating to a new stadium that will be built just opposite on the other side of the A34 in this triangle of land, which would greatly benefit the station, although it might need upgrades to handle the matchday crowds and hopefully a good walkway to cross the two roads. It's overall another decent station, particularly compared to the previous holds. Just leaving north, there are also a couple aggregate sidings for various things here too. Just thought it was worth mentioning. Islip Station, on the other hand, located not that far along the line from Oxford Parkway, feels a little forgotten. While it was upgraded when the line was, with 2 platforms and a footbridge, it doesn't have a building, and most significantly it only sees one train every 2 hours, a quarter of the trains that currently use the line. This is roughly the same frequency that it received before the upgrade, so I get the feeling that it's a bit unwanted. The village of Islip is relatively small, so demand in the area is lower, but I still feel like the service could be increased. I have seen a potential argument that local residents actually want it to be this infrequent so people don't drive through and park at Islip to use the train, and instead use Oxford Parkway. However, I think it's already clear enough that it isn't a park and ride station like Oxford Parkway, which has a much better surrounding road network. I have also seen the opposite argument that some residents would like more trains so they could use it as a more reliable service to and from Oxford. The station is a little tucked away, with a long access road to the platforms, and it has a small car park as most stations do. The footbridge doesn't have lifts, but there is still step-free access to both platforms with long ramps from the main road. As with the others, I find it fun to look at what the station previously looked like before the upgrade on Google Street View. Overall, the station itself is very much adequate. I just wonder whether its potential is being fully reached. For example, I think it could benefit with more development in the surrounding area, as the line has many useful connections. Frankly, it's already impressive enough that it receives direct trains to London. When the line reopened in 2015, services were originally more express style. Trains after Bicester Village usually called at only 1 or 2 stations between there and Marylebone, and these would vary for each train. Services would usually take only just over an hour from Oxford, and while it started with 2, I believe there was a period when 3 trains now ran, 1 every 20 minutes, although I might be wrong. This was able to rival the first Great Western route via Reading in terms of speed. And speaking from experience, during this time my family and I used this route on trips to London by parking at Oxford Parkway. However, I believe since lockdown, services are now much slower, taking between an hour 20 and an hour 30 to get to Marylebone. There are a couple reasons for this. Services to Oxford used to almost exclusively be operated by Class 168s, and even a couple times by Chiltern's local hauled stock, which can both operate at 100 miles an hour. However, now, due to having less trains available, especially as they are currently undergoing refurbishment, lots of the Oxford services are now provided by 165s again, which can only reach 75 miles an hour. Due to this uncertainty, all the trains are now being parked with this slower top speed in mind, so they consistently run on time. Also, due to the removal of a slower service to Banbury and 3 services to Aylesbury via High Wycombe, the stations between Marylebone and Bicester, like Saunderton and Beaconsfield, are instead being served by the Oxford trains more often. Also, since 2017, IETs have been operating the GWR routes along the newly electrified Great Western Main Line, and these take as little as 45 minutes to London, which could never be matched on the Chiltern route. Marylebone to Birmingham trains are also now slower, which is particularly annoying for people in Warwick and Leamington where it's their primary route to London, so it seems like services on the Chiltern Main Line have just been downgraded a little and still haven't fully recovered. While it is a shame to lose these fast services to Oxford, it isn't necessarily bad as they provide a different purpose in linking Oxford to the various stations along the Chiltern Main Line instead of as an alternative express route. However, for Oxford Parkway and especially Bicester Village, faster trains to London would be beneficial. The current service pattern, off-peak on weekdays, which took me a while to eventually figure out, has 2 trains an hour, all of which call at Oxford Parkway, Bicester Village, Princess Risborough, High Wycombe, Beaconsfield and Gerrans Cross. Then one, usually a Class 168, also calls at Hadlenham and Tame Parkway and Wembley Stadium, and the other, usually a 165, instead calls at Saunderton. Services do though have a completely different stopping pattern at peak times and on weekends. Also, there's a chance later this year that because Chiltern are getting extra new trains, services will be completely rearranged again, perhaps to be more like what they used to be. One thing nice that did happen recently is that Chiltern operated a Boxing Day service, which is a rarity, from London to Oxford, in 2025, and it was done mostly due to the high shopper traffic expected at Bicester Village that would otherwise be missed. There is of course one major thing coming to the line which I have barely mentioned so far: East-West Rail. This is the plan to effectively rebuild the full Varsity line, although it will use different alignment between Burford and Cambridge. The route would provide incredible connectivity to so many places, both along the Oxford-Cambridge arc and beyond, by finally having a route in the south that bypasses London. While the full thing is likely still a decade away or more, the first stage rebuilding the line from Bicester to Bletchley is complete, with the line open and running for freight since June 2025. A new half-hourly service to be operated by Chiltern is planned, from Oxford to Milton Keynes, yay, calling it Oxford Parkway, Bicester Village, a new station at Winslow, and new high-level platforms at Bletchley. This was supposed to commence last year in 2025, but, due mostly to disagreements with unions over who will operate the doors, they are yet to run, which is stupid. I won't get into it anymore here though, other than that the most important thing should be to get services actually running. The services will use Class 1 96s leased to Chiltern from West Midlands Railway, which is good as they are new and well equipped. However, they are relatively short with only 2 carriages. While they can be doubled up, there will only be 6 in operation, which won't be enough to run every train doubled up, without using some of Chiltern's other stock, which seems short-sighted to me as I think there's a lot of potential for this route. Although I suppose it will probably do for the early stages. Let's see if that's actually the case though. I also wonder if some of these should stop at Islip, as with 4 trains an hour on the Oxford to Bicester line, it could easily receive more calls, once an hour at least. But for the rest of the line, there is a bright future ahead. It of course still lacks some things, most notably electrification, which may eventually come to all of East-West Rail, but before that they definitely need to electrify the main line to Oxford. I believe it can certainly be said that this line is a recent success story in railway regeneration, going from nothing to a small awkward branch line to become part of one of the country's most important upcoming routes. And the stations along the line, especially Bicester Village, have already proven a great success and serve as an example of what investment in railway lines can bring.